Hello, my lovelies, and welcome back. I have a very, very special guest here with me. It's Dan, who will explain his name down here himself because I can't read that name. And welcome, Dan. Thank you for agreeing to do this. We have a super fun and interesting topic today, which is Glorfindel, the character of Glorfindel, and very important character for the people who just know the movies. They might be like, what is this girl talking about? But we will explain ourselves. And I think it will be a very fun and interesting stream, also for the both of us, because Dan is a very good researcher. And Dan knows a lot. Like, look at his backdrop. He knows a lot about the Lord of the Rings, and he's a big part of this community. But you'll explain and introduce yourself, Dan.
Sure, will do. So some of you may know my screen name as Voice of Reason in various different chats around the sort of the Song of Ice and Fire community, which is how a lot of people that know this channel probably know it from. My name, Voice of Norleme. I'm being dyslexic here and getting it the wrong way around. That's Quenya for the voice of wisdom, actually, because it seems to be no word for reason in Elven languages. Which, if you know your Tolkien, probably doesn't surprise. If you know his ideas about science and enlightenment and such things. And that's all I can say about myself, really. Shall we move on?
Yeah, perfect. So again, welcome, Dan, and I'm very happy to have you here. And as I said, Dan knows a lot. He called me out on a few mistakes I made in my video, not in a like annoying way, but just rather, I just read that passage as well. I have this and this idea, so it's really cool. And I think both of us like the approach of not just this is Glorfindel. He was born in that age. His father was. I think we like to have a deeper look and make up our own theories and discuss that. And I think this is exactly what we'll do here today. So I hope you people will learn, or not really learn, but maybe you found out these things as well, or you always wanted to know a bit more than just the part in Lord of the Rings, because Dan and I researched other books and writings, texts of Tolkien as well, regarding this character. That's, I think, what I at least always do.
He's spread out all across the legendarium, isn't he? He shows up in lots of different places where you don't expect. And there is a little bit of a controversy about him, which we'll address at some point, about whether the Silmarillion Age version is the same version that we see in the Lord of the Rings. But we'll get to that.
Exactly. We will. Yeah, and that alone shows you, he's one of the characters that is literally mentioned in so many texts, and not many characters have that same role. So you can, and also by when does he come back, but we'll get to that. That alone shows you how important that character is to the story, but also how important he was for Tolkien. And I think he as well loved the character. And maybe let's start with let's start describing him. So Dan, what do you know about Glorfindel, and what struck you? Sure. Or maybe when you read about him again, what was like, I don't remember that.
But his name means the golden haired, or golden tresses. I think there's a few different translations. Tresses being long locks of hair. And he was a Noldo. He was he sort of worked for the House of Fingolfin. But there's a little bit of mystery around him, because we don't know his parentage. We do know that he was born in Valimar in the Days of the Trees. So he's pretty much an OG elf, near enough.
Yes.
If the major elves that are still alive by the third age that we know about, pretty much Círdan is the only one that's older, I'd say. So it's an important character.
And Galadriel, Galadriel, maybe we don't.
Galadriel, we don't quite know enough about her to guess, but yeah, probably the most important character that got left out of the movies, except possibly Bombadil, you could argue, but that's a different one. That's more of a cameo, in terms of his place in the books, whereas this is a core character, really.
Perfect. Good. Yeah. So for me, look, I was always intrigued when I read, because as you said, he's an Noldor, and there are texts. There's one text, and it says, and I think it's in the Council of Elrond, where it's mentioned he is I don't have the quote here, but he is of a house of princes, and I was like, wait a moment, what does that mean? Then we talked about his appearance. So his hair is blonde, golden blonde. So Tolkien was very specific with looks, right? So the Noldor normally had dark hair. And he is very close to Turgon, right? So let's go to the family tree to explain that a little bit, because I think people are very confused with all these names.
Never been laid.
So there was the High King Finwë, and he had a second wife after his first wife, Miriel, died. That was the mother of Fëanor, one of the most important characters. He created the Silmarils. The Silmarillion was named after that. So very important family, right? And they are kind of the ruling house of the Noldor, one of the most important tribes. Like, if you know the Lord of the Rings, Celebrimbor, he is of the house of the Noldor. Galadriel, she is Elrond. Like all these people, they are of that house, and other houses as well. So Finwë was the High King of the Noldor. He married a Vanya elf, Indis, and the Vanya, they have also, but not golden. They have like more white, I would say, like white or gray hair. Blonde. Blonde hair. I'm confused. Those are the Teleri. So they have blonde hair, right? So they had children. And you said it. So one of their child was Fingolfin and Finarfin. So we know these two from the Silmarillion. They also had two daughters. And not everybody knows that, but they had two daughters. It was Findis. I think that was even the eldest child. And then Fingolfin. Fingolfin was just the eldest boy. And then a second daughter. And her name is Irime. I have no idea if I pronounced this correctly. So, Irime. And we don't know anything about the daughters. Not really, but we know one thing. We know Irime, the second daughter, she joined the flight of the Noldor. So she joined Fingolfin and Fëanor going to Middle-earth.
So they would have crossed the Helcaraxë.
Yes. So she was one of and Glorfindel also, because he followed Turgon, right? He followed Turgon, and they crossed the Helcaraxë. And we know that the second daughter, so Fingolfin's sister, went with him, and they crossed the Helcaraxë. Fingolfin as well. And, well, she might have had blonde hair because her mother was a Vanya, right? Galadriel is described in that way as well, because Galadriel obviously is, well, she's the daughter of this youngest son, Fingolfin, Finarfin. Yeah. So
and we know that she's also known for her hair as well.
Exactly. She's also
Fëanor was said to have sort of been obsessed with her hair, and I think there's a Silmarillion line that speaks about wanting to catch the light of the trees.
Yeah.
in her hair or something like this.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact line now, but
yeah, and super important. If you remember the scene of Gimli, that he he asked for her hair, and
yes,
and Fëanor also asked for her hair. I think
exactly,
even
yeah.
a few times, and she never wanted to give him because she knew somehow, or she felt he was evil, and she never gave him her hair. But she gave it to a dwarf. That makes it even more special.
Was
If
he
you think
evil?
about
Was he
it.
evil, or was he just
Yeah, I think he's
a bit of
evil.
a man child? I
Nah,
I can't make up my mind.
I think he's evil. John and I will talk about him in our next podcast. Yeah.
Right.
Not evil, but yeah, he was not a good guy.
He's up there when it comes to elves.
I mean, Kingslaying. Hello.
Yeah.
That's like really, really bad. Anyway, okay, so let's go back to that, to his appearance. So he was a Noldor. He was a prince. Yes, if his mother was a princess, obviously he's from a line of, from a royal line. And Tolkien even stated that. So my guess is he is her son. And him and his mother, we don't know anything about a father. We don't know if she was married. Again, this is me guessing, but it could be, because why is his hair blonde? I mean, obviously there can be exceptions, but it would fit. It would fit. Prince, royal house, blonde hair, being of the Vanya, and he is very close to Torgon, and Torgon is basically, if that would be true, he would be his cousin, because Fingolfin, Torgon's father, would be his uncle. So that would kind of explain his close kingship. And we know, it's always the eldest son. So Fingolfin was the eldest brother. And so therefore he is from a younger, from like a younger line. For me, it would make sense. I think Tolkien never mentioned that, he wrote many letters on various topics where he explained stuff he never wrote down in his books. He even wrote to fans and everything. And he never mentioned that, but sometimes he just gives hints. And I love the theory. This is my theory. I keep going with it. At least we know from
text. It makes sense. The blonde hair thing does match up. And again, like Galadriel, known for her hair. Yeah. Glorfindel, known for his.
Yeah. Yeah. And House of the Golden Flower. Okay, whatever. So he was born, you mentioned he was born in a man, and I think that is very important to say. You said that makes him one of the oldest elves. Obviously he's not one of the elves like for example, whoever, like if Finwë is his grandfather then, but they awoke in Cuirennen in Middle Earth, but he is one of the elves born in a man. That means, and we know many, there are many parts in the text that say that these elves are special because they have the light of the trees, because they saw the trees, right? First of all, that makes them light elves because they've been in a man, they've seen the trees. Light doesn't mean good or bad. It just means they saw the light of the trees.
Yes.
And there are passages in the text where talking about Medros and others, where it is explained that these elves are special. They are more powerful in a way. They are more wise.
You talked about enjoying the battles and the combat and that side of Tolkien. One of the things I enjoy about the combat in Tolkien is how there's a spiritual dimension to the combat and the battles, and you see that particularly with Glorfindel on several occasions. And there's a particular chapter which we'll get to where Frodo sees him revealed in he's an elf lord. How do they put it? An elf lord revealed in his wrath.
And I think they even say that he, Frodo, that's the water scene. We'll get to that later. But I think even Frodo says that he saw a light or something. I haven't read the passage in a long time, but I think he saw him shine or something like that, like the radiance. He saw him like he was in a, that hints at the power he has.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. So born in a man, in like years of the trees. We can just guess, but that would be my guess. And then, as we said, he went with Torgon, who he felt kinship with because maybe he was his cousin. He went with them to Middle-earth. So they fled. And it is very important, and that was important for Tolkien. Maybe you can explain what happened with Fëanor and the other Noldor, and why he didn't partake. And Tolkien stated, and it was important for him to tell us that Glorfindel didn't partake in what happened then.
So yeah, there was the kinslaying, which we talked about. Fëanor wanted urgently to get back to Middle-earth again because Melkor had stolen the Silmarils. You're going to get into this with your other podcast with John, but I'll try and summarize this as best I can. And Fëanor, essentially, he stole some ships from some other elves that lived nearby in Valinor, killing them all in the process, stealing their ships. And then some elves were involved in the kinslaying and some weren't. And it's quite clearly stated which ones were and which ones weren't. And Tolkien seemed to consider it, well, rightly so, considered it an indelible stain on the conscience of the elves that did partake in that crime. And that, in turn, is what led to the doom of the Noldor.
And the curse. Yeah.
And the curse, yeah. So Glorfindel was not involved in the kinslaying. Judging by the text, it seems to be that some elves did actually take part in the kinslaying who weren't actually, they got there late or something.
And they
thought that, that they didn't understand the situation and they just jumped in rashly and blood got shed. So that led
but that's
to the
a different situation, that's like you see your friend fighting somebody you never, like somebody else, and obviously, and you don't know what happened before, but he's your friend, so obviously you try to help him. I think
I'm from London and we've all been in that situation.
True. No, but this is what I mean. It was not the same like Fëanor and his people did. It was very different, and they were confused, and they just wanted to aid and help their kin. So I think obviously, yes, the Valar forbade them to come back, and they were under the curse as well. But then he was allowed back, and he was re-embodied, and we'll talk about that. So obviously, that there's a difference between what Fëanor did and what Torgon and him and Galadriel and other good elves did.
Yeah, the ones that survived the first age pretty much all got forgiven, didn't they?
Exactly.
But the next time we see him show up is with Aradhel, right? I believe.
No, I think Ninad and Nodiad is before Nirnad and Nodiad. Yes, it's before that. So I think it's important to, my favorite part of the stories is obviously the fall of Gondolin. I love that city. It's so good. I want to live there. I want to move there. Let's rebuild Gondolin. Yes. So his king, King Torgon, he founded, they lived in Vinyama by the sea for a while, and then they moved, Torgon then founded the hidden city of Gondolin, and he moved there with him, and Torgon was really, I don't know if he got, we don't know that, if he got like the house, his house was one of the 12 houses of Gondolin, so he was a really important and well-known figure in Gondolin, in that city and in that kingdom. I don't know if he got that after the battle and his deeds and his help, but we don't know. But let's talk about the battle. So that was the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. Do you remember what happened there? Do you want to
roughly? I haven't read it in a while, but yeah. So this was the death of Fingon. Hurin was captured.
A lot happened.
And most of the men of Dor-lómin died, didn't they? Apart from Hurin. Yeah. That's about all I can remember, to be honest. It's been a while.
Yeah, no. So Torgon.
But it was. I think it was the 4th or 5th battle of the First Age, wasn't it?
It was. Yes.
It was basically the most tragic event of the Third Age, where a lot of people up and died.
Exactly, because men betrayed, for one of the first times, men betrayed the union of Maedhros. So men betrayed elves here. And, you learn of, men have become evil. And yeah, it was a very big, big victory for, I sound like Trump now, big. It was a victory of Morgoth, and he would have destroyed all the elves if not Turgon would have chimed in to the battle with 10,000 soldiers. Now, just we never know if these numbers are real or not, but he says he has an army of 10,000 elves. And they were Noldor, so their weapons were deadly and really good, and they had the best trained soldiers. And people like Ixelion of the Fountain and Glorfindel were in that battle. And Glorfindel was one of the captains, and they helped to fight back the orcs. And Ring of Barahir, all that. You can check that out in the stream. John and I did on the Fall of Gondolin. We mentioned that battle there, but it was an epic battle, and he was one of the king's first in commands, one of the captains. I think he had the left wing or something like that. So he's a good. That tells us he's a good soldier. That's basically
it's slightly coming back. I think Ecthelion had the right flank, and Glorfindel had the left, as far as I recall.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm doing this all of the top of my head. So if I'm not right, you can call me out in the comment section. So that happened, and that just shows us how, because I was talking in the beginning, I want to talk about warriors, right? And he was a very, very good warrior, and that even before he was reborn and came back with even more powers, like Maya-like powers. So even before that, he was a very powerful elf. And then your story, Aradel, the king's sister, happened.
Yes. So Aradel. Oh goodness me, I'm going to forget names here. Aradel was the sister of Turgon, who lived in blimey,
Gondolin.
in Gondolin, and she had a fondness for the sons of Feanor, who lived out towards the east, more towards the eastern Blue Mountains and that sort of area of Beleriand. And so she decided she wanted to go and visit, basically. So she took a sort of a small contingent of warriors with her when she left, and Glorfindel was amongst that number.
Or the king sent them with her.
I think it was three of them, wasn't there? It was Glorfindel, Ecthelion again, and I can't remember the third.
Galdor, I'm not really sure. I think three. I think it were three, like big house warriors. Yes.
So they head south and they head towards Dariath to try and see if they can pick up any sight of the Sons of Feanor and make touch with them, but they're denied entry to Dariath. Dariath is the kingdom where Thingol rules, who's king of the Sindar elves.
Yes, the father of Luthien.
Exactly. Yes, that guy. Worst father-in-law in history.
Well,
most demanding.
Later on, in the beginning, yes. Later on, I think my father would be like that. Wait a moment, this is my daughter. Why do you want to marry her?
Well, your father named you after Helen of Troy, so he probably would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. He did.
So yeah, he denied entry to the Noldor, so they turned north and they lost her there. They lost her. I think they were attacked by monsters or something.
It's actually cool because Shelob and her, her brood, they come into play here. I think it was the Valley of.
Right.
Oh my God! Nangorthreb, whatever. I can't pronounce that one. It was in the Ered Gogoroth.
Yes. The Mountains of Shadow, which there's another Gorgoroth, obviously, in the Third Age that will.
Yes, but that's where Shelob resided,
Yes,
where
exactly.
Shelob was, and it was all of a sudden it became dark and they lost each other, and that was obviously the webs, Shelob and her offspring spun there. So
Yeah, it's one of these
we
many
have,
examples of history repeating itself, isn't it?
yeah. Yes, exactly. So she got lost. He has to go back to his king and be like, "Oh, I lost your sister."
Yeah, so the first time we actually see him, we talked him up quite a bit here, but the first time we actually really see him have a role in the story, he's kind of a big fail for him, you could say.
Yeah. Good, perfect. And then, that's a whole other story. And again, John and I talked about that in the Fall of Gondolin. What happened with Aradel and Eol and Maeglin and all that story. And I think Maeglin is an important part. And I want to go off topic for 1 second here, because when I reread the Fall of Gondolin, I noticed something, and it has to do with Glorfindel as well, because you mentioned Troy, and I love the Iliad, and obviously the Fall of Gondolin resembles a little bit the Fall of Troy, right? And especially one bit there, and that is, Idril, the daughter of the king. She was married to a mortal. She married a mortal, and she had and she was the mother of Earendel, who was very important for later. And she felt something was off, and she built a tunnel. So through this tunnel, they fled during the Fall of Gondolin. We'll talk about the Fall of Gondolin a bit, because he had a big, Glorfindel fought epic battles there, and we learn a lot about him and treachery and whatnot. But so Idril built a tunnel, and that always where it's very, do you remember when in the Fall of Troy, Aeneas, I don't know if this is how we would pronounce it in German, Aeneas, him and a few other people were the only people who could also, like, through a tunnel, they could escape Troy. And he was actually, or he's said to be, the founder of Rome. They then left Troy, him and just like a handful of people. And this is the same what happened in the Fall of Gondolin. Just Idril and her husband, her child, and a few other people could escape through a tunnel. And they founded, a new kingdom. And this is exactly what Aeneas did, well, because he founded Rome. And it's linked a little bit, obviously not everything, but if you think of Maeglin as the horse, this is what I always think, the Trojan horse.
The Trojan horse.
Yeah, Maeglin is the Trojan horse. Look, like he is. He brought forward the Fall of Gondolin, and there are people who warned the king, exactly like Priamos. Priamos was warned by Cassandra, his daughter, and whatnot. But Ulmo, all the others, they send Tuor to Gondolin to warn him. But he was prideful, and he was like, "No, my city will stand." Same like Priamos. So just a short excursion that I really think there are lots of similarities, especially the flight of Idril through the tunnel, and then Glorfindel comes into play. But
there's as many parallels there as there is between Atlantis and Numenor. I mean, there's historical parallels in a lot of these different locations and storylines, which is inevitable, I suppose, when you're constructing a mythology.
Which is totally fine. He loved these stories and myths, and this is what George R. Martin does. This is what every good writer. You don't have to invent everything from scratch. You can, take a good story and make your own story out of it. So it's perfectly fine. I don't think he copied anything, and it's different, But that always, like, when I reread it, I was like, oh my God, this is literally like the Fall of Troy. Good. So that was that. But before, and if you don't mind, I can read a short passage, and we can talk about the fight, because the fight of Glorfindel and Ixalion and the king against the Balrogs attacking the city, it's actually so good. And if you have to, it's like the passage is just a short. It's not really long, but everybody who says, oh, there are no real good battle scenes in Tolkien, yes, there are. Yeah, so there's a really cool one. I don't want to read everything. Okay. Let me start here. So thus comes the last. So imagine, Fall of Gondolin, Morgoth attacks the city with dragons, balrogs, because he found out from Meglin, the king's nephew, where the hidden city is. So he knows, he attacks, and he brings air force. So because the city still is very hard to take, big walls, tunnels, whatnot, but he brings air force. So this is how
it's the dragons that win it for him, isn't it, really?
Yeah. And there's, what can you do against balrogs and dragons? And there are different versions from Tolkien. I think there's even one version where there are like 30 balrogs, and then he changed it to one because
there's a little bit of sort of controversy about this, because I think Christopher Tolkien at one point said there was only 7. But which doesn't match at all with other things that we've got there in the published legendarium. So, but take it away, please.
Yeah. So imagine a city burning, and it's not like a small city. Just imagine it being like, maybe not London today, but still, if they can send out 10,000 soldiers, this city is really big, right? So it's not a small medieval city. It's a gigantic city, maybe like King's Landing or whatever. Battle is people are heavy fighting, and as I said before, Glorfindel has a house. He's the chief of the House of the Golden Flower. There are 12 houses, and all of the chieftains of these houses, most of them, they're really good warriors as well. Thus comes the last stout gathering of those defenders in the square of the Palace of Torgon. So that was the square in front of the king's palace, basically. Among them are many wounded and fainting, and Tuor, the king, is weary for the labors of the night and the weight of Exelion, who is in a deadly swoon. So Exelion dead. Even as he led that battalion in by the road of archers, this is just the name of one of the roads, from the northwest, and they had much ado to prevent any foe getting behind their backs, a noise arose in the eastward of the square. And Glorfindel is driven in with the last of the men of the Golden Flower. So his house was already spent, so he didn't have that many warriors left. Now these had sustained a terrible conflict in the great market to the east of the city, where a force of orcs led by balrogs, so many balrogs, came on them at unawares as they marched by a way to fight about the gate. This they did to surprise the foe upon his left flank. So there are lots of tactics, battle tactics, Tolkien was a soldier, right? So he knew battle tactics. This is also what people always complain about, know their battle tactics in there. This they did to surprise the foe upon his left flank, but were themselves ambushed. There fought they bitterly for hours, till a fire drake new come from the breach, a new one, breach overwhelmed them, and Glorfindel cut his way out very hardly and with few men. But that place with its source and its goodly things of fine workmanship was a waste of flames. So basically everything, the fire drake blew them up in flames. The story tells that Torgon had sent the men of the harp to their aid because of the urgency of messengers from Glorfindel. But Salgand, this is the chief of the House of the Harp, concealed this bidding from them, saying that they were garrisoned to the square of the lesser market in the south. Blah, 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 blah. Goes on. So this shows you, the House of the Harp, Salgand, he's a friend of Maeglin, and he betrayed. The king told him, go and help Glorfindel and his there are just a few men left because they already fought bitterly against the Balrogs and dragons. And then that house of the harp, they should aid him, and the king told him that, but he didn't. And then something really cool happens because Salgan tells his men to go somewhere else, but they see through it and they are like, yeah, no, keep talking, do whatever you want, we will help Glorfindel. So that also shows you, and they betray, or not betray, but they don't listen to their commander, and they go and help Glorfindel, which is so cool. And that shows you how important he was for the warriors and for the army,
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. While we're on battle tactics as well, it might be worth noting that this was the very first story that Tolkien ever wrote, and he was on active duty on military service at the time during World War One, on medical leave for trench fever, I think.
Yeah.
So you can picture a sort of a drugged up Tolkien writing about demons and and warfare. It's sort of it's a very compelling image, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Of him writing this story in 1917.
Yeah, and there are other versions where I think Christopher tells us that before he changed it to Balrogs and dragons, they also brought iron tanks, which is iron whatever machines, and which are basically tanks. And then he changed it, to because obviously this is a medieval fantasy world. He changed it to dragons, but still, those dragons. I mean, everybody who loves the Song of Ice and Fire, you know how deadly a dragon is, and just imagine a bloody Balrog. So that city is doomed. And
I wonder if Durin's Bane was there. We don't know.
I mean, he wouldn't have been hiding forever in Moria, right? So
no, he had to get there from somewhere.
Exactly, he had to get there, and he is hiding for a reason, because
maybe he saw Glorfindel. Maybe he ran into him.
Well, we learn later when he comes back, he is described as powerful as a Maya. Indeed. So, and Balrogs are fallen Maya. So Balrogs are like Gandalf is a Maya. So Balrogs are fallen Gandalfs, and Glorfindel is described as when he comes back as one of them. But yeah, maybe do you want to continue? So what happens then?
So you already mentioned the tunnel. So Idril, Tuor, and Erendil are on their way out of the city. And they're accosted by Balrog, and Glorfindel dives in. And there's a few different versions of even this part of the story as well, isn't there? But Glorfindel dives in, and basically, in a parallel with Gandalf in the Third Age in Lord of the Rings, again, he dies in combat with a Balrog, on a sort of in a cliff area with a sort of narrow ledge, essentially.
But he stabs the Balrog first, which is so cool. So he actually manages to kill a bloody fire demon. He stabs the Balrog, but
then the Balrog grabs him by his long blonde hair.
By the hair. Yep. So guys, shave your hair if you don't want to get killed like Gandalf. And with Gandalf it was the whip, right? He catched him with I think Glorfindel even cut that off. So that shows you again, if he can kill a Balrog, that's pretty epic. And then something really and so his aid of helping the princess and the heir to the throne, Eärendil, escape and make it out alive is. So I mean, not only has he fought in the city, but he even did that. He gave his life to fight for the people, the last people escaping Gondolin. And and it's so cool that do you remember that it is mentioned that the eagles, I think it's
Thorondor,
and they grab him and they bring him to a hill, and he's buried there kind of, and on that hill golden flowers bloom from then on.
conveniently.
Yeah, no, but it's so beautiful. And again, like, in the isn't it like in A Song of Ice and Fire where Lyanna, like on that tomb, like her flowers are blooming. Like it's a very cool visual and image.
It's very poetic. It's the House of the Golden Flower.
No,
And it's
foreshadowing again.
once again.
Yeah.
So
Good. So he's dead.
then the rest of the Third Age happens. Well, the last few years of it.
Yeah.
Erendil grows up. Just to sort of paraphrase events, Erendil grows up. He sails to Valinor. He enlists the help of the Valar come, and they kill Morgoth or banish him.
And the First Age ended. Boom. But the fall of Gondolin is pretty late in the First Age, so just a few years later. It falls. I think Gondolin falls at 510 or something, and 590 or something. The First Age.
Erendil was 7 during the fall of Gondolin, right?
He was very young. Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So he died and he's buried there, but we know the elves don't really die because this is just the fate of the men we know of. They go to the halls of Mandos to Valinor, and they are kind of, they live in a form of spirits, and then later on some of them are re-embodied, but they live in Valinor.
The tale goes that they're waiting there for the last battle, essentially, which is, think of it as being like Revelation.
Dagorath.
Yes, exactly. So they're there in the halls of Mandos, and I don't know what they do there, but they're chilling in the halls of Mandos. I think of it as a bit like Valhalla, actually.
It is, 100%, yes. And I think, the concept of time is very different there. Because when you then know he was re-embodied in the year, or he came back to Middle-earth. He was re-embodied earlier, we learn, but he came back to Middle-earth in 1600. So what's he doing?
I've been researching this one, actually. When he comes back to Middle-earth, there's a few different dates that Tolkien played around with.
Yes, they are. But I think there's one important one, and for me, it's 1600 because something happens there.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that is probably actually Tolkien's preferred date, although
I think so, yeah.
So we have this in one of the volumes of the 12-volume History of Middle-earth series, which is the last one, I think, which is The Peoples of Middle-earth, which is it's basically just bits and pieces that it hadn't been published at that point. Lots of notes, and it's in the section which is in the very last sort of last few writings in the last few years of Tolkien's life that we get, which this is recorded in. And Tolkien was playing with ideas about how did Glorfindel come back, when did he come back, why did he come back? But we gather that he was re-embodied, and it was as a reward for his valor, and essentially, I suppose the Valar probably had a plan for him. We don't really get too many details, but we know that he's re-embodied, and that, as we said, he comes back sometime between 1200 Second Age and 1600 Second Age. I think Tolkien expressly sort of denies the idea that he came back with the Astari at the same time in the Third Age, doesn't he?
Yeah, although I think it said that he was friends with Gandalf, so he knew Gandalf
it does say
from
that,
Aman.
Yeah, indeed. Gandalf being in A Man of the Time, it sort of suggests, it says Glorfindel possibly as one of a small party, more probably as a sole companion who landed with Gandalf Olorin about Third Age 1000. See, this is the thing about reading this out loud, is that this section is literally, it's just a couple of, like, you can imagine it being scraps of notes, and Christopher literally says it's written on the back of one of his like publishing documents. So it's literally it's like something in the back of one of Tolkien's scrapbooks from when he was like in his late 70s.
Poor Christopher, like, seriously.
Yes,
Good
God bless that man. So I mean, you could argue that this isn't canon, and people do, don't they?
I know.
But it is published posthumously, and it's clear that Tolkien considered Glorfindel to be the same character, because that was the point of this note. It was, he is the same character. Let me try and work out how that works.
Yes, and the thing is, he wanted, in the end, I think he really wanted to connect the Silmarillion to the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
This is what he did with The Hobbit, because he wanted to connect The Hobbit to the Lord of the Rings, and you can see that in the changes.
Yeah.
Of
when he wrote The Hobbit, I don't get the sense that he originally planned to. Hello, welcome back to your scheduled programming. We lost connection there for a moment, didn't we? Yes, I was having a thought about The Hobbit. I was about to say, when Tolkien started writing The Hobbit, I don't think he had any plans particularly to connect it to his entire legendarium that he'd been writing since his 20s. I think probably most likely he was using ideas from that when he wrote The Hobbit, combining that with a sort of children's fairy tale story that he had. And those ideas started coming in when he started writing The Lord of the Rings, right? And I think Glorfindel might be the first example of him actually incorporating the whole legendarium into the story. Do you not think? I mean, there are earlier examples that work, but they're recycled ideas, I think.
Yeah. Also Galadriel, because she really didn't exist in the Silmarillion, not in that way.
No, not at that point in time.
And then Christopher rewrote her kind of in the Silmarillion because she was important. And there are other versions of Galadriel, but she was so important in the Lord of the Rings. So she must have been, you need to mention her in the Silmarillion. And he did that many, many times. But yes, I think Glorfindel is a prime example for what he did there, to connect everything.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the drafts of the Lord of the Rings, he was added later in as well, wasn't he? I think. So it was after. I think the first example was probably the Beren and Luthien story that Aragorn tells the hobbits is where he starts doing it. But I don't know why I was talking about that before we lost connection. I don't remember.
We took a little break in between, but yes, no. I think we were talking about it, because I was saying you were mentioning the text. You found the information about the two Glorfindels being one Glorfindel, and him going back on that, and he did that many, many times with a lot of things, because he published the Lord of the Rings, and that was very successful. But he had second thoughts. He wrote a lot of letters with people who read the Lord of the Rings, and he wrote back and forward. And obviously, when you see your work finished and you read it yourself and you have time to think about it, you are like, I could have changed that. And because he always wanted to publish the Silmarillion as well, that was he actually wanted to publish the Silmarillion before the Lord of the Rings. So that was really important to him. So I think he always went back and changed things, and this is why he was
a master of the retcon.
Yes, but for reasons, it was not because he thought then about it and he wanted to connect worlds. And then obviously you need to change things. You need to write in characters in places they haven't been in before, because otherwise you would have lied, because he said Galadriel is one of the oldest, most powerful elves. So where was she in the Silmarillion? Like that stuff. So I think that's a good thing, but this is why we have the Book of Lost Tales. This is why we have Unfinished Tales, because this is him trying to go back and trying to, or him making notes on handkerchiefs and whatnot, and Christopher tried to connect that, or give us at least all the information. And as you said, there are people who say only his published works published by him in his lifetime is canon for me. I don't think like that. I don't think life is like that. I don't think Tolkien thought like that, because he wanted to publish other things as well. there was just no time. And in the beginning, publishers didn't want to publish the Silmarillion. They even didn't want to publish the appendices, because they were like, what is this? We don't need this. But Tolkien was, no, we need this, because this explains a lot. Because if you go to the appendices, this is basically another book.
Yeah,
just
it is.
written.
No, I mean, it literally is. I mean, my copy that I sort of, my everyday copy of the Lord of the Rings. I've got a nice copy and an everyday copy of the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
I've got individual books, and I've got the appendices in a separate book.
Yes.
Which, if you've never read the appendices, it is a separate book. It's a separate reference book.
Yeah.
So it's the Lord of the Rings in 7 parts, really. But yeah. Shall we move back onto Glorfindel?
Yes. But this is welcome to my channel, Dan. This is has nothing to do with being clueless, more of we want to explain things.
The feckless fangirl.
Exactly. No, yeah, let's go back to Glorfindel. So he was re-embodied as one of the only elves, because who else was re-embodied? I mean, we know of Luthien, but that was another reason, and she came back as a mortal. She didn't come back as an elf. Damn it, I lost you again. Shit. Hello, and we're back. This might look a bit different. I'm a bit brighter because I need light. The sunlight has gone. Dan and I experienced some internet problems because apparently everybody is using the internet in Europe at around this time.
It's almost like there's some sort of pestilence of Morgoth or something.
What? The evil breath of Morgoth is out here in Dolomen. No, just kidding. So we're back, and I think where we finished off was we were talking about Glorfindel being re-embodied and being sent back, and I think we agreed on a time. Like, I say it's 1600 second age, because listen, this is my theory, and I made a video on that, and I even mentioned Glorfindel, and this is how I got the idea to talk about Glorfindel. So I mentioned, the rings were forged in 1600 second age by Sauron, the one ring, and Glorfindel, exactly in the same date, was sent back to Middle Earth, being re-embodied in we think it's his old form, because the description fits what he was supposed to look like before in the Silmarillion First Age time. And he was sent back to Middle Earth, and I mentioned in my video, because I do think he is kind of an ambassador of the Valar, because we learn that he has more powers. He comes back even more powerful than he was before. And we said he fought Balrogs and whatnot, so he was powerful before.
I like to think of him as like an elvish Istari in a way.
Yes.
And actually Tolkien did consider that as a possibility for his character.
Yes, exactly. And and he comes back kind of fairer as well. This is also mentioned. And when you remember, how does Gandalf come back? He comes back as Gandalf the White, right? Even more powerful. So
again, they died in the same way and came back similarly as well.
Exactly. So it obviously it's not the same, because he's an elf, but still he's more powerful than he was before, and I think that is a very important fact. And he didn't come back just he could the Valar. Why did they send him? Because he was so successful in fighting the evil. He was a good guy. He was not Feanor or any of those ones. He didn't commit any crimes. He fought on the side of the good, without any prize. So the Valar, obviously he was the right choice. Would you agree there? Do you think there's a hidden agenda in sending him especially back?
Yeah, it's a really complicated question, actually, when it comes to talking about the Valar, because you have this idea of providence and what is planned and what is free will, and that's a big theme with Tolkien. So
I know. Yeah.
it's a big question, actually. But certainly there was a plan for Middle Earth, an ongoing plan of some description, and this idea of providence plays into Glorfindel's role in the Lord of the Rings and in the Fellowship of the Ring, because he turns up at just the right time, just after Frodo had invoked the name of Elbereth at Weathertop. We'll get onto this properly because we should probably cover Fornost first, but I think yeah, certainly there was a plan there, and I think that they chose the right person. That's indisputable.
Yeah. And there's even an older, because I'm a very strong, I really believe that there is something in there. It was not just coincidence and then Glorfindel was there. I think there is a plan. The Valar don't want, not like in the First Age or, before the times when they fought against Morgoth, they didn't want to interfere. Look, they hesitated. And just because Earendil literally pleaded with them and was like, you need to help us, you need to interfere in person, you need to help us, because they don't want that. They are like Eru, they help, they send eagles, they help a little bit, and like the whole tour and Gondolin, so they help, but not first person help, right? And not direct help. And I think sending Glorfindel was planned, and he's the right person, and we'll explain why. But I also read, when doing some other research, that an original plan, Ulmo, so the Lord of the Waters, Ulmo had got the job from the other Valar to aid Middle Earth as well. So there's some so they sent out people to help the good, to fight the bad.
This idea of Ulmo sort of having more agency and having more input is quite prominent in the Silmarillion when we're introduced to the character, isn't it? I mean, we're told that he's more in touch with Middle Earth because he's everywhere. He's encircling everything because he's the embodiment of the ocean.
Exactly. And what does Glorfindel, we get to that later, but what does Glorfindel suggest? Do you remember? He suggests to the Council of Elrond to throw the ring in the water.
He does, yeah, exactly, yeah.
And who is in the water?
Terrible idea, by the way.
I know. But, that plays because the idea behind that, Ulmo is there. And we know the ring wraiths and others, also Sauron, they were afraid, even Melkor, they were afraid of the water. Because Ulmo was omnipresent there, and the Valar. This is why the elves love the water, because they hear, Ulmo, and
perhaps because the one who obviously contradicts that point is Gandalf, and you wonder whether they have the same remit, as it were, because they ostensibly they seem to be sent to Middle Earth for the same reasons, by the same collection of powers.
Yeah,
but they seem to have very different ideas about solutions in that chapter.
But that's a good thing, because then, you have plan A and plan B. That's my idea behind it, why they have different approaches. But also he suggests that somebody please bring the ring. So he, first of all, he wanted to send the ring to Valinor. That was his first idea. And then everybody was like, but nobody will accept the ring. They don't want any, because they don't want to interfere. They will not accept the ring. And then he said, let's either throw it in the water or let's destroy it in Mount Doom. Those were his two ideas. And then the whole Frodo and Fellowship thing came into plot, and that was his idea to bring it to Mordor and destroy it. Okay, but let's take one step back, and let's talk about Third Age early on. So a Battle of Fornos. Do you want to start? Because there's a very, very cool prophecy. Everybody knows about that one.
There is. Prophecy which is mentioned in the movies. But so where do you start with that one? I mean, it's in the middle of the Arnorian Civil War, is it not?
It is, yes.
It's the end of it. So there was the Battle of Fornost. Fornost is the capital of Arthedain? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, and they were one of the last kingdoms standing of the northern kingdom. So there were 3 kingdoms: Cardolan, Arthedain, and
something beginning with R.
Yeah,
begins with R, I think.
Whatever. because they split up, like Gondor and the northern kingdoms, they split up between the sons. And those were the weaker kingdoms in the north, and they had a really powerful neighbor, the Witch King of Angmar.
Exactly. So we pick up our story again with Glorfindel. Glorfindel is in charge of the elves of Eriador. So that's the elves of Linden, which is Gil-galad's former stomping grounds, and the elves of Rivendell. And Glorfindel leads them against the Witch King. They defeat him in battle, and they rout him. And the elves make to sort of charge after him and chase him down and kill him. And he says no, and he makes a prophecy. He says the Witch King will not be slain by the hand of a man. Essentially, I don't know that word for word, but
don't. It's like don't like leave him alone. Don't chase him. This is not his doom will come later.
Exactly.
He will not fall by your hand. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and obviously we know he dies at the hand of a woman and a hobbit. So he was right. I always wonder, where did he get that from? Where did him saying that make it so? Did he have foreknowledge of it? Did he have a vision of it? How does a prophecy like that happen?
I have no idea, and I really thought, I thought a lot about that. I mean, the Valar don't know, right? They don't. I mean, they have an idea, but you learn very often that they don't know Eru's plan. They didn't even know when the elves were born. When would they come? They don't know everything. They have a vague idea of a concept, but how can they know something like that? But just like Gandalf, what was with Frodo and Gandalf? When Gandalf said, Gollum still has a role to play. How does he know that? This is the same concept.
I think what it is, it ties in with in a really cool way. It ties in with the music of the Ainur. Because do you remember the verse? I think it's about the third movement of the music of the Ainur, and Beru's like he's getting pissed. He's had enough at this point. Melkor's still doing his thing, and he's playing this repetitive music that he's playing, or whatever he's doing, to play this discord in the music of the Ainur. And there's a line in there about the notes of discord being blended into the third movement of Eru. And how he'll take the music and turn it into something positive. And it's this idea of redemption and sort of turning something on its head. And it's this idea of that Tolkien had of eucatastrophe, which is this fairy tale idea of things seeming darkest before the dawn, and then things suddenly having this dramatic turnaround, which we see with Gollum. Classically, and in lots of occasions throughout the stories. But yeah, it's a really cool moment when we have this prophecy early on, and this is in the appendices, isn't it? This is extra reading, but
everybody knows it because of the Eowyn scene in the Pelennor Fields. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, in the movies, he sort of says, "No man can kill me."
Yeah,
and we know that that's because of Glorfindel, because we've read the books. But that was the prophecy.
Yeah. So there's a theme in Tolkien's writing, and the theme is the easiest way is always the wrong way. And you see that many times, like that time the Ring of Barahir got lost. I think that was one king of Gondor, and he had like a chance to, oh god, I do not really remember this. I need to, it's very often like he either has to sail somewhere, and if he takes the easy route, that will lead to his doom. If you take the long way, the hard way, that will probably be the right path. And this is very, this is religion in the end.
Yeah, it's a
What
Catholic
comes,
idea, isn't it? Really.
yes. And so I think that is also that, because remember, so what was the scene? So there was Prince Eanor, his name was, and he was the prince that later should become king in the northern kingdoms. And he was the one, his horse bailed on him, and that was the part where the Witch King kind of laughed at him and was like, well, you want to be a prince of men, and kind of that stuff. And he wanted to chase after him, and then Glorfindel came in and said his prophecy, right? And, going after the Witch King in that moment would be the logical way. This is how I felt. It's not mentioned in the other examples. It is stated easy way, hard way, but it's not here. But this is how I understood it. So going after him, killing him would be the easy way, but this person has a purpose. The Witch King has a purpose, same like Gollum, right? And he's needed for the story. So yeah, that's how I understood it, but I don't have another like real this is proof explanation. That's just how I feel about it. But and you know what, some things should stay a mystery, because we don't need a solution for everything. Yeah. and that happens a lot in Tolkien. But yeah, Battle of Fornost, prophecy. And a very interesting thing, Prince Eanor then later, years and years later, because that was still with him, like his pride was hurt that the Witch King laughed at him, and he kind of got beaten by the Witch King. He couldn't kill the Witch King. And the Witch King then kind of invited him and said, you can come any day and kill me. And this is what he did. He wrote many, many years later. He wrote to Angband, and he was never seen again. He went there, fought the Witch King. We don't know. It's not explained what happened, but he was never seen again. And this is how the line died out.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know what happened to the last king. He just disappeared. I like to think that he became a wraith.
Yeah, but that was
that idea.
I love the idea. And isn't that the idea in that game, in that computer game? In that Shadows of Mordor? I think I'm not 100% sure, but I think
I think that I've not played that game. I've played a little bit of Lord of the Rings Online. I think it might pop up in that game maybe. But I've only played like a few hours of that even. I haven't really played many Lord of the Rings games.
Yeah, but time-wise, it doesn't fit because
those
the ring rates
not canon.
No, I know, and the ring rates were complete with the Witch King. I think the Witch King was the last one that fell. And as I said in my go check out my who was the Witch King. So he was a one of the princes and kings of Numenor, what I think, and so that doesn't fit because it was a century earlier. But still, maybe a replacement. Who knows? some evil creature walking in Angband, working for Sauron, doing evil deeds. But yeah, so that happened early on in the third age, and then third age, Council of Elrond.
So we the next time we meet Glorfindel is during the Fellowship of the Ring, during the first book. And I've just reread this yesterday, so I should get this one pretty well. So the chapter opens up just after Frodo's been stabbed with the Morgul blade on Weathertop, which we see the scene from the movie. The same thing happens more or less, sort of. And he appears at the point in the movie at which Arwen appears. So we meet Glorfindel. He's on the road behind them, and they hear his horse coming up behind them, and then they. Oops, I was going to say a swear word there. They they crap themselves. They got off the road quickly. And
everybody's like, I know what he wants to
say. he came up the road behind them on his horse Asphaleth, and they got off the road quickly because they think the Black Riders are chasing them down, which they are. But it's Glorfindel. He comes through. He comes cantering through with his golden hair streaming behind him, and his horse with bells on it, which I love. I love this idea of a horse with bells on.
It's like you can't hide.
Which technically is a continuity issue, where they say riding elf fashion is without a saddle or a bridle. But Glorfindel, he's a Noldo, so maybe he just likes bling on his horse. His horse is actually in the movie.
Yeah,
it's the Arwen in the movie. She says his line. She says, "Not olim Asphaleth," as she takes Frodo and gallops off. But yeah, he turns up and he learns that Frodo is, well, he already knows that Frodo is abroad because of an earlier passage that we get with the elves that they meet in the Shire. So Glorfindel goes out looking for them. Elrond sends him out, and he says, "There aren't many who can ride openly against the Nine, etc."
And before
so Glorfindel
that,
was sent out because he's powerful enough to contend with the Nazgul.
Yes, and he's so powerful. And before that, when he's riding through the Shire and looking for them, he meets 5 Nazgul, I think 3, and then later 2. And just like you said, they were so afraid. I want to say something else, but afraid. Let's use the word afraid. Yeah. They were super afraid of him. And I mean, listen, Black Riders on these horses, everybody in Middle Earth is shitting themselves because they are so afraid of them. And well, everybody except Farmer Maggot, who's also like, what do you want? Shout out to Farmer Maggot, my homeboy. And that shows you how powerful the dude is, that even, the Black Riders he meets randomly on the road, they're like, oh, no, Glorfindel, bye-bye. So it's really cool. And it's sad that was not in the movies, because you get the concept in the movies, everybody's so afraid of them. No, Glorfindel is not, he's seen Balrogs, he has seen everything. And he has the light of Aman in him, and he's a very different character. And like you said, he is the Elven Vala, or what did you call him?
He's like an Elven Astari, I like to think of him as.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been sent to Middle Earth for the same reasons by the same people as the Astari.
Exactly.
And he almost seems to have powers on the level with them. Slightly different, but he's re-embodied with more power, and we're told that he's got the power of a Maiar, almost level to the power of a Maiar, which the Astari are. So he eventually puts Frodo up on his horse, and he takes they continue on to the ford of Bruinen, and just before they get to the ford, the Black Riders do turn up, and they come up. What's going on?
My cat is here. My cat is and she's meowing all the time. I have 3 cats, so I'm Queen Beruthiel. I think she had 7 or something. She's meowing. This is why I was doing this. Sorry, I didn't want to disturb you. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So they're coming up on the ford of Bruinen, and that's when Glorfindel has that line. He says, "Not olim Asphaleth, not olim," which is like, I guess it's Sindarin, I think. He says, which is Sindarin for like giddy up, essentially. So the horse bolts. Frodo's like frozen in place, and he's like petrified with fear, and he's halfway to becoming a wraith at this point. Interestingly, in this whole chapter, in the movie as well, one of the big differences, I watched this scene last night. One of the big differences as well is that Frodo is like, he's completely zonked straight away in the movie. As soon as they stab him, he's out of there. Whereas in the book, it's quite a gradual process, and we get his point of view, and we get the world is becoming shadowy, and we get these kind of like descriptions of him looking at his friends and not being able to see their faces and things like this.
And he can still talk, because I think he didn't want to ride the horse alone. He said that, I think, to Glorfindel.
Yes. He says, I don't want to get on the horse because I don't want to leave you all behind and in danger. And Glorfindel sort of laughs and he says, when you've gone, we're not going to be in danger. The really, really cool part about this chapter, though, is the very first paragraph is Frodo straight after he's woken up after being stabbed in the dell at Weathertop. And do you remember the first words that he says when he wakes up?
Mm-mm.
And so he says, "Where is the Pale King?" Meaning the Witch King. And then at the end of the chapter, of course, we know what happens. People listening may not, so I should probably explain. Frodo gets to the ford. He gets to the other side. He turns around. The horse is I think the horse, it's not clear whether the horse turns around or Frodo turns the horse round, but Frodo he turns around and he defies them, and he what does he say? He says, "Go back to Mordor," or something similar to what Arwen says in the movie. He's alone at this point. Glorfindel is coming up behind, and then this is when the water starts to rise, and the defense system of Imladris starts rising, and the white horses come out around the corner and splatter the first three wraiths. And Glorfindel comes up behind them, and he just rushes them with like a burning brand of fire. And this is my favorite Glorfindel moment, like at least level with the Balrog from the first age. He chases them into the river. They see him coming, and they bolt and they go into the flood because they're too scared of Glorfindel and Aragorn as well. It has to be said, coming up behind with a flaming brand, basically a pointy stick that's on fire. And they crap themselves to the point where they actually jump into the river.
And they're afraid of water again, except of the Witch King.
And then this is where we get Frodo's point of view again, and we get the parallel to the first paragraph of the chapter. The last paragraph of the chapter is this moment where we see Glorfindel through Frodo's eyes as an elf lord revealed in his wrath, as Gandalf will later put it. Which I think it illustrates that eucatastrophe again, because it's just this perfect parallel with these two images of the Pale King at the beginning of the chapter and the blazing flame incarnate elf lord at the end of it.
I think he describes it as a gleaming light or something like that as well.
Should we read that chapter? I'll get it up.
You can, because my
last paragraph of it.
Do it. And my idea behind that was he sees him. I think that comes out in the talk he has with Gandalf when he awakes in Imladris. He sees him in his fair form, in the form from before he was re-embodied. He sees that this is not a normal elf. There's something more behind him. That's how
Gandalf will later explain the metaphysics of it a little bit, and he'll refer to him being a light elf, essentially. He saw the light of the trees, and he'll refer to the fact that he doesn't use the word Noldor, I don't think, but he basically he explains the metaphysics of elves being more powerful who have been to the Holy Land.
And it reminds you of that fight of Fingolfin versus Morgoth. He also wrote that in Wrath, and it said, his horse was so powerful and the ride, and he was gleaming, and he was so powerful he could hurt Morgoth, right? That always reminded me when I read the passage about Glorfindel. And I mean, Fingolfin was one of the most powerful elves ever.
Okay, I'm trying to find the flight to the ford.
Because I just have the Silmarillion and the fall here. My quotes.
I've got the ebook up on my screen.
Yeah, but it's a really cool scene. No, we need a lot of.
We can cut this out in post.
Nah, I'm too lazy to do that.
Here we go. We got it. But the pursuers were close behind. At the top of the bank, the horse halted and turned about, neighing fiercely. There were 9 riders at the water's edge below, and Frodo's spirit quailed before the threat of their uplifted faces. He knew of nothing that would prevent them from crossing as easily as he had done, and he felt that it was useless to try to escape over the long, uncertain path from the ford to the edge of Rivendell if once the riders crossed. In any case, he felt that he was commanded urgently to halt. Hatred again stirred in him, but he had no longer the strength to refuse. Suddenly, the foremost rider spurred his horse forward. It checked at the river and reared up. With a great effort, Frodo sat upright and brandished his sword. "Go back," he cried. "Go back to the land of Mordor and follow me no more." His voice sounded thin and shrill in his own ears. The riders halted, but Frodo had not the power of Bombadil. His enemies laughed at him with a harsh and chilling laughter. I love this bit about the power of Bombadil.
It's cool.
Come back, they called. "To Mordor we will take you." "Go back," he whispered. The ring, they cried with deadly voices, and immediately their leader urged his horse forward into the water, followed closely by 2 others. "By Elbereth and Luthien the Fair," said Frodo with a last effort, lifting up his sword, "you shall have neither the ring nor me." Then the leader, who was now half across the ford, stood up menacing in his stirrups and raised up his hand. Frodo was stricken dumb. He felt his tongue cleave to his mouth and his heart labouring. His sword broke and fell out of his shaking hand. The elf horse reared and snorted. The foremost of the black horses had almost set foot upon the shore. At that moment there came a roaring and a rushing, a noise of loud waters rolling many stones. Dimly, Frodo saw the river below him rise, and down along its course there came a plumed cavalry of waves. White flames seemed to Frodo to flicker on their crests, and he half fancied that he saw amid the water white riders upon white horses with frothing manes. The 3 riders that were still in the midst of the ford were overwhelmed. They disappeared, buried suddenly under angry foam. Those that were behind drew back in dismay. With his last failing senses, Frodo heard cries, and it seemed to him that he saw, beyond the riders that hesitated on the shore, a shining figure of white light, and behind it ran small shadowy forms waving flames that flared red in the grey mist that was falling over the world. Yeah, so that's that moment. That's Glorfindel coming up behind. I mean, it's right at the end of that passage, and it's like it seems like nothing except for we've already got the whole chapter with the whole kind of the idea of who this guy is, and you get this real sense of him being a spiritual being.
Yeah,
is what I love about this whole part.
Yeah. No, it's so cool, and I never. The first times, I don't know, the first 2-3 times I read it, I never even thought about it. But then, the concept of these 2 characters are the same character, because I didn't get that in the beginning. So then when I reconnected that, I was like, yeah, of course, it makes sense. And it's so cool. But you can read through, it's like you think he has like a fever dream. You don't really read deep into what Frodo actually sees. And
well, he thinks he's having a fever dream, I think, doesn't he?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was.
It must have been Farmer Maggot's mushrooms.
Yeah, or the ring. I mean, the ring made him also see other. Because this is how he saw. Obviously, the Nazgul, he saw them different than the others. Because they had no real form. You just saw the crowns the Witch King was wearing and the clothes, but there was nothing behind it, right? This is how they are described. And Frodo saw more because of the ring.
Yes. I don't think that they were probably these sort of like in the movie we get these sort of like I don't know what you call them, like sort of ghostly sort of eldritch horrors. I don't think they probably look like that, but
no.
But yeah.
Yeah, but the descriptions are vague, it's not like you can paint a picture from what Tolkien tells us.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Cool. So Glorfindel. And then, then the whole thingy happens with the Council of Elrond. So everybody's in Rivendell then. And what happens then? Because that is also, I mean, we mentioned a few things like what were his suggestions, but that's
so we already talked about this a little bit, didn't we? His input is he has some suggestions. So there are more. That whole chapter is a lot longer than it, as you'd imagine. It's a lot longer than in the movie.
It is,
so you get him, and you get a few other characters that aren't in the movie. Glowin, Bilbo, obviously.
And he mentions Tom Bombadil.
Yes, he does. That's his other suggestion. We talked about his suggestion of putting the ring in the river and just letting it go into the ocean and float away.
And his
other
was the
suggestion
one.
is, what about this Bombadil character?
No, I think he says he speaks against Tom Bombadil. No, or who speaks against? Or is Gandalf saying, he'll probably use the ring?
There's another elf who suggests it, I think.
Yeah, and then he says, and I think Glorfindel says, no, let's not give it to. But I'm not sure. I think he speaks against Tom Bombadil. Don't quote me on that. Somebody does. Yeah. And another, while you look it up, another really cool thing is in earlier versions, because a lot of people, and I saw even videos on YouTube on that, why was Glorfindel not sent to be a part of the company, right? A part of the fellowship? Because he's so powerful. How is he not part of the company? And actually, in early drafts, Tolkien wrote him in the company. But everything he does later on with bringing the hobbits in and everything, that speaks completely against bringing a powerful elf in the company. I mean, yes, Aragorn was powerful, obviously. He was the heir to the kingdom. But still, that's a very different thing. And he was hidden, you know. He didn't have Narsil at that time. He was basically a ranger. He was nothing more at that time. He joined the fellowship.
was a mortal as well. He has a tiny little bit of Maya blood in him and a little bit more elf blood in him, but he's basically a mortal. So I mean, Gandalf makes the argument, I think in the chapter after the council, it's picked up again, because the end of the council, they hadn't actually decided who's going at that point. But Glorfindel is considered to be a part of the fellowship, but Gandalf essentially shoots it down and says he's too powerful. This is a mission of stealth, and he'll be a hindrance rather than a help. He'll be more help on the battlefield than he will be in the fellowship.
Yeah, exactly. But in an early draft, he was part of the fellowship, and then he was replaced by Legolas.
Right. So Legolas being just a regular sort of he's a Sindar, isn't he? He wouldn't show up on the spiritual plane in the same way, I suppose. Because that passage that I've just read, it basically illustrates what the wraiths would see when they see Glorfindel. Because Frodo's becoming a wraith, and you can imagine this glowing figure of shining white light trying to sneak into Mordor. That's not happening. Imagine him trying to sneak past Minas Morgul.
Yeah, no. And the thing is, he was also the guy, coming back to why they were afraid of him. He was the guy who cast the Witch King. The Witch King will remember Glorfindel, you know?
Yeah, of course.
Seen that guy before. He cast me. So maybe let's wrap this up, like our thoughts on Glorfindel, why I love him so much. I guess, or I reckon you like him as well.
I do. I can. So we've talked quite a bit about the movie, especially in this last part. And I have to wrap it up by saying I do understand why he wasn't in the movie. Because, well, it's obvious. I mean, Arwen needs to have a bigger role than what she had in the book. She just needs to in a movie. It just wouldn't jive with it with a modern audience. And they do preserve some of the elements of that with her storyline. With that said, what it is missing, I think, is the connection to the legendarium, and it's the connection to him being an Oldo and him being this first age epic character. and it's missing to some extent the detailed metaphysics angle of him being a Noldor and being having seen the light of the trees and everything.
Yeah. And the important part, we learn that he's a prince, and again, I come here in with, I think he's from the royal house of the Noldor, which makes him very unique because he's literally one of the last Noldor. I mean, yes, Elrond and all of them, they're related, but he's mingled from all the houses of the elves, Elrond. But he would
I agree with you that he's of the house of Finarfin, by the way. I mean, it seems clear that he's probably got some ancestry in that branch of the F family. I wouldn't like to nail it down to his particular parentage, but I'll let you theorize on that.
Yeah, him and his mother, this is my theory, came through a Helcaraxes, so he's a prince of the Noldor, and one of the last ones, because all the other ones died. Everybody died, like that whole family. I think Celebrimbor was the last pure Noldor Noldor prince, I mean, later the Noldor, obviously some of them were still alive, but they mingled. Like the Noldor, the concept of the Noldor from the beginning of time and the first age, that's no longer existing. And again, curse of the curse plays into there, that whole family tree got wiped out and destroyed. All of Fëanor's family.
The elves that we do meet in the early chapters when we're still in the Shire, Gildor's elves, I think they're Noldor as well. So there are others, but not many.
No, and they were the biggest. I mean, the Teleri are more by sheer numbers, but they're spread and even the Sindar are Teleri, origins. But still, the Noldor were explained as this really powerful. They loved weapon, they loved craftsmanship. Fëanor was the most important elf, and he invented languages, he invented the Silmarils and whatnot, and that was his family, and all of them died, and that would make him Glorfindel as literally the last one of Finwë's children, grandchildren, whatever, would make him very, very special because he survived till the fourth age. Even he was still alive then.
Yeah, he doesn't. I think he's one of the last elves to leave as well, isn't he?
We don't really know.
I remember. Do we not?
No, I think we don't know. But I think he would go back because he was born in Valinor, right? So that's his home. I think he will go back.
Yeah, you'd think so.
Yeah. So good. I really enjoyed this. And I think, we theorized a little bit. We obviously had our facts kind of together-ish.
Or less,
but it's I have like 5 notes here with the family trees, and the rest I always kind of like, okay, let's talk about it, and comes while talking.
I think you can't. I mean, this is my first time doing this, but I'd imagine that you can't make like enough notes ever. There's always going to be something that you're going to come to that you're just going to have to ad lib anyway from memory.
And a lot of is interpretation because there are 100 texts. So which one is right?
Yeah. That's the other thing as well. I mean, some of this is speculative on our part, and on Christopher Tolkien's part, trying to piece it together.
Cool. So I hope you enjoyed this, Dan. I did.
No, I did. It's been really good. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. Yeah, and like you can tell people now where they can find you, but this is like my outspoken invitation. I would love to do this again, to talk, I don't know, like other epic warriors, because there are more. If you're into that, if not, tell me now.
I think definitely. But let's do some evil warriors as well. So let's alternate between some.
Hello,
some evil...
I did Witch King videos and Sauron videos.
Yes.
Of course.
So let's do Balrogs and Nazgul and all sorts as well. But yes, thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure and a blast. And yeah, I definitely do this again.
Perfect. So tell people where they can find you and what's
so I don't have a channel. Thanks. I don't have a channel. This is my first time ever doing anything broadcast wise. But please feel free to connect with me on Twitter at Bone Locomotive. And maybe I'll start YouTubing at some point. A lot of people are getting into it these days, so we'll see. But
it's not that hard. It just literally, I mean, Gemma and all of them, they made fun of me for years because I had my channel for like 3 years and never put content on there. But I did it, and it's not that hard. It's just, we both of us have, this is not our job. We have a regular job, which sometimes is, as I just told you, I haven't done videos in forever because I have so much work to do right now. And it's not that easy if you have another job and a life, but it's so much fun and I really enjoy it. And yeah, just do it. Go for it. You can't do wrong, I mean, good.
Yeah, I think I will.
Yeah, so I'll add your Twitter down here, and yeah, just people to let you know. I mean, most people watch it a bit later. Sorry, my cats are very annoying at the moment. They're meowing, but they got food. I'm feeding my animals. Yeah. So what's next for me? Finally, and I hope this is happening because we've been postponing, or I've been postponing poor Aziz for 3 weeks now. Next week, Aziz and I will go live, I think on Tuesday, we agreed, and we're talking about the Mines of Moria, because Aziz found some hints in A Song of Ice and Fire chapters, some similarities and whatnot about dwarves and the Mines of Moria. So I'm not big into dwarves. I don't know that much about dwarves, but I'll look into it for Aziz. So Aziz from History of Westeros.
Are there dwarves in The Song of Ice and Fire? Sorry to interrupt.
Nah, it's about the mines. I don't know what he will explain. What do I know? I don't even like A Song of Ice and Fire, or not that much at least. But he will explain. And yeah, that's next. And then I'll finally have I literally rewrote that 4 times now, my final video on the downfall of Numenor. I have a video on the last secrets of Numenor, which is a really cool video, and there will be many facts about Numenor, hidden artifacts, lost artifacts, how many people really lived there, how strong was the army of Numenor, why was Sauron really afraid of them, like really cool. It's not like this is Numenor, it's a 5-star shaped island. No, it will be very different, and it Dan's laughing. And it will be, yeah, like hidden secrets in Numenor, and a bit of a guessing game about other stuff you always wanted to know or not. And yeah, that video will hopefully be out beginning of next week, and I'm working on a Saruman video, which is I love Saruman. I love the baddies,
Yes.
And yeah, working on Saruman video, but more videos will come. I promise you, like the edited lore videos. And John and I will have a stream on the Noldor and Feanor, hopefully soon. And yeah, well, Dan is here now, and Carol and I will continue our podcast meets. She like, how annoying are these cats? Do you hear them? They're so loud.
I can hear them.
Yeah. And Carol and I will continue our Fellowship of the Bling, which is completely a podcast. You don't see us. We just talk about C.S. Lewis and Tolkien and religion in both of their works, which is really, really cool. And yeah, that will happen in the next weeks-ish. Yeah. Yeah,
very non-committal.
Yeah, keep things open. Don't overpromise. I don't like that. So yeah, that's what will happen. And thank you guys for tuning in. Sorry for our internet problems. It's the apocalypse. What can we do? I hope everybody's safe and happy and fine. And we'll be back, and enjoy your day, night, whatever it is for you. So what's your phrase to say goodbye? Is it something Elvish? Come on.
No, I was just going to say goodbye, Helen's lovelies.
No, yeah. Everybody's picking up on that. Bye-bye, my lovelies. Bye-bye.